Hello, and thanks for joining today's webinar from Real Story Group. My name is Scott Dill. I'm on the business development team here, and my colleague and our managing director, Jarrod Gingras, will be on the line momentarily to take us through the heart of today's presentation. But I just wanted to kick things off with a couple quick housekeeping items of note. Do want to mention that you will be receiving a copy of these slides within the next couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. And then for our subscribers, you'll also be able to access a recording of this presentation in your subscriber library. So you can keep your eyes out on that for when it does get loaded up in there. If you ever have questions on any of the presentations that we show, you can always reach out to Jarrod or myself at any time, and we're happy to talk you through the webinars or the different offerings that we have available. But to get started, I want to give you a little bit of background about Real Story Group, as I do see a number of new folks on the line with us today. So at heart, we're an industry analyst firm, but what's a little bit different about us is that first, we only really focus on omnichannel or marketing technology, so the MarTech stack. So what you see here on the screen are the markets that we cover within our research. We've been fortunate to work with 15 of the Fortune top 20 and over 4,000 customers in 60 countries. And really the conversations these days go around, you advise me on my technology stack, my MarTech stack, and give me an idea of what's the best avenue to take. And so we're having a lot of conversations of late about that with folks, and today in this presentation we're going to share some predictions on what to look forward to in 2020 and beyond. So what we'll really talk about is what we expect to see in these particular areas, these markets that we cover. These are the vendors that we evaluate within each of these areas. You'll see that within each of the subway lines here, there are some platform type vendors in the middle. And some of the questions that we often have are, does it make sense to have one platform or one vendor for our full MarTech stack, or do we look at some other solutions that may be on the periphery of the map here that can integrate well with each other? So certainly something to think about as we move into the next decade. So that's something that I'm sure to address here as we continue to proceed through today's presentation. The other thing I wanted to mention to you about Real Story Group as well is the fact that our approach to working with vendors is completely unique in the analyst world, in that we don't work for vendors. We don't advise them on their strategy. We don't speak at their conferences or write white papers for them. Our only focus is on technology, users, and buyers, and providing you with the real story on what the vendors do well, but maybe perhaps more importantly sometimes what they don't do so well, where they might fall short for you. We've developed a reputation of being some of the toughest critics in the analyst world, and frankly that's one we're quite proud of. So one of our analysts, Jarrod Gingras, is on the line, and he's going to take us through today's prognostications for 2020. So Jarrod, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Scott, and thank you all for joining us today. As Scott mentioned, this is our yearly endeavor at making some predictions for the next 12 months to come. And we've been doing this for, gosh, I think it's over a decade now. And if you get some time, you want to go back and look at, you can search our blog on the realstorygroup.com site if you want to see some of our previous years' predictions, both good and not so great. We've had a relatively high success rate in our predictions, but certainly we haven't been 100%. But go check out our previous year's blogs if you're so inclined. A couple of disclaimers before we jump into the predictions. As always, there's a fine line between predictions and aspiration. So for some of the 10 predictions that I'll go through today, some are based on trends that we're absolutely seeing as analysts following the various marketplaces that Scott mentioned earlier. But some of the things may also be, maybe it'll have a little bit of a slant towards some of the things we maybe hope will happen or wish might happen, or and so keep that in mind as we go through this. We have 10 predictions to go through today. These are not all my predictions. I have the honor of going through them with you today, but the entire Real Story Group analyst team contributed to these. So thank you, Tony. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Apoorv, in particular, for submitting your predictions. All right, let's jump right into it. Prediction number 1 for 2020 is around the dawn of a new technology stack. So those of you who are subscribers to Real Story Group, you've undoubtedly heard us talking about the new technology stack throughout 2019. And our prediction here is that this is going to continue in 2020. Many of the most, I'd say, the most forward-thinking enterprises in the world are well down this path of rethinking the traditional technology stack, and we expect many other enterprises to jump on board, if not all enterprises to jump on board to revisit what should be in your marketing technology stack. So what do I mean by that? So let's, on the screen right now, I have what is in most cases thought of as a representation of the traditional technology stack. I'll call your attention to the colored boxes in the middle there. These are what we call our systems of engagement. And for many of you, this is where you do your work. You know, as marketers or anyone creating experiences, this is where you're going to do most of your work. Whether you're creating experiences for the web, or you're creating experiences for your email channel or your social channels, or maybe you're working in sales and in the CRM is your system where you're entering information about your customers when you're on the phone and dealing through more of a voice channel. So traditionally, we've spent a lot of time and energy and money in investing into these systems of engagement. But what we've found is for many organizations, this channel-specific view of the world is not good enough. And in order to achieve some of the true omni-channel experiences where you're creating consistent experiences in a variety of different channels for your consumers, this kind of legacy view isn't good enough. And so what's happened is many architects, enterprise architects, and marketing leaders have said, we need to do something different here. We need to take some of the logic that's baked into these channel-specific systems, take some of the content that's baked into these channel-specific systems, take some of the data that's built into these channel-specific systems and move it lower in our stack so that we can manage those things in a truly granular way so that we can deliver the data and the content and the rules to the right channel at the right time to the right person. And so what's happened is this new layer of what we like to call these enterprise foundational services have emerged. And so there's been a lot of energy from some of those leading enterprises out there to say, what new systems we need to put into place that are not channel specific, that are truly helping us manage the building blocks of experiences, independent of channels. So there's this whole emergence of different software marketplaces in the last few years, and I think this is going to continue in 2020. So something that you're going to hear us talk a lot about is this notion of a content platform, a one-stop shop for core content objects to support omnichannel experiences. You've heard us talk a lot in the last year about CDPs or customer data platforms. You know, this is a way to unify customer and prospect records, giving you a 360 view of your customers and prospects so that you can act on them in a variety of different channels. We have this notion of operation hubs where you can create, collaborate, and schedule across teams, both internally and externally. And then the fourth pillar is this notion of campaign and journey orchestration. So again, you all might have rules baked into certain channel-specific systems. Like, for example, you have a lot of rules baked into your web content management system. Many of you have different journey rules baked into your social publishing tools. But again, if you want to deliver true omni-channel experiences to your constituents, you need to pull those rules out of those channel-specific systems and manage those in a way that can be utilized regardless of the channel. So this new stack is a very real phenomenon, and every single organization is going to need to consider how this will impact them in 2020. Prediction number 2 is a bit of an extension of this. The concept of omni-channel and building omni-channel experiences is not a new one. I remember thinking back in my own career, we're talking about omni-channel 15, 20 years ago, right? Getting the right content to the right person at the right time. This is not a new thing. However, in the last year, in addition to enterprise architects and marketing leaders, making investments in new technology that gets them further along this path, we've seen internal groups start to form with this as a focus. So it's no longer something that's coming in the future. It is something that organizations are really pushing to achieve. So that's a sign for us that this is truly real. And in fact, we ourselves formed a council of executives among our client base. We have more than 20 or so representatives of Fortune 1000 companies who have committed to meet together 3 times a year to discuss these challenges they're facing when it comes to delivering on this omni-channel future. And so these conversations are happening. And if you're not having these conversations yet, you will in 2020 and beyond. Just a side note here, if any of you are interested in joining the Real Story Group Council on this, feel free to reach out and inquire about that. There's an application process, and we can get you more information on that if you're so inclined. Prediction number 3 is, again, a bit of fallout from this new stack and the direction that companies are tending to go in recent days. And that's one where we think with the dawn of new technology and more building block elements with regards to content and data and rules being pumped out to a variety of different systems, people tend to ask us all the time around, well, this is going to be a huge technical challenge to integrate all these systems, right? It puts this notion of this new stack definitely puts an emphasis on integrations, especially because you can't buy the new stack from a single vendor. You might hear claims of that from sales and marketing folks from some of the biggest software vendors in the world out there to that effect. But the reality is you're going to need to cobble together best of breed solutions to build the stack that's right for you. That's just where the most successful organizations that's the approach most successful organizations are taking in the end of 2019 and will do so in the near future. So people ask us, isn't integration going to be the biggest challenge here? It's going to be a challenge, certainly, but I don't think it's going to be the biggest challenge. Maybe surprisingly to most, I think the biggest challenge that people are going to face is not a technical one, but rather it's going to really highlight some of the non-technical capabilities of your organization. So for example, integrating between 2 systems in today's day and age, many of the modern technology systems have some really good APIs, right? So data and content can pass between these systems. But in order for those systems to talk to each other, they got to be speaking the same language. So we've seen organizations who technically can connect systems, but on the back end, their taxonomies and their metadata doesn't align. And so there a ton of work has to go into place to making sure that you map different metadata from one system to another so that you're speaking the same language. Likewise, as you start to cobble together different technologies, you need to think about the user experience impacts that this has on your workers, on your marketers, on anyone who's building experiences, right? Because now you're talking about working in multiple systems, and that can be jarring for people. You don't want to create barriers to people creating optimal experiences. You want to make this as seamless as possible. So I want these seemingly disparate tools to come together in order for your workers to have a truly seamless work environment. So I think non-technical issues will rear their ugly head more than ever in 2020. Next prediction is, we think many organizations will rethink their MarTech spending. You know, over the last few years, there's been a spending boom out there. And I know many of you have felt this. You know, there's lots of purchases of new technologies because there's a lot of new technologies in the marketplace that are pretty powerful and promise to do a lot of good things for your organizations. And that's all well and good. However, what we're seeing is marketing leaders now saying, okay, we've invested this money. What's our ROI? You know, are we really getting the bang for our buck here? And, you know, marketing leaders are starting to say, you know, where can we attribute our sales coming from? So there's a big push to say, let's refocus our efforts, look back at our purchases, let's see if we can cut the fat here and truly pare down to the technology and capabilities that are truly working for us, and not just assume everything is working. I think here this might be a shock to some people, but I think the face of the modern marketer is actually going to change a bit. You know, for years it's been this interesting blend of creatives and data people, but I think we're going to see an influx of marketers with financial acumen come to the fore as well, because I think there's so much money being spent, and there's so many different models that can be applied here to doing marketing technology correctly. And I think you'll start to see some financial analysts make their way to marketing teams around the world. The next prediction is a bit of a redo for us. Now, I know everyone's seen this map that's from chiefmartech.com. This is the MarTech 5000 that was published in April of 2019. There's actually over 7,500 here. I think it's something like 7,800. A few years back, we actually predicted that this graphic would start to shrink, and we were wrong. If anything, it's continued to grow. And when we asked our analyst team to take a fresh look at this, given what we've seen recently in all the marketplaces that we're covering, we've seen some consolidation in some of the marketplaces, but for the most part, we've seen new players come on board and new additions start to challenge the old guard. So as we stand here in December of 2019, our prediction for 2020 is that we won't see contraction here, any meaningful contraction that is, but we will see, in fact, this to continue to grow. Now, will we reach a tipping point at some point in the future? I'm sure we will, but our prediction, at least as we stand here today, is that we won't see that tipping point hit in 2020. When we talked about the different marketplaces that we cover here at Real Story Group, you might have noticed one of the marketplaces is something we call Omnichannel content platforms. This is our newest research area that we published last month. We think it's just a really important, maybe one of the most important marketplaces to emerge in the last 20 years that we've seen, because it's really addressing some core pain points that we're seeing people encounter with the traditional technology stacks. And this notion of omnichannel content platforms are really resonating with buyers today. Now, since we've launched this new research stream, you all wouldn't believe how many emails and phone calls we've received from technology vendors who say, well, we're an omnichannel content platform. You know, we don't want you to consider us just a web content management system or just a DAM or just a MarTech tool. We think we're an omnichannel content platform as well. And they might not be wrong, but I think as we've defined it, I don't think everyone is truly an omnichannel content platform today. Now, by our definition, I want you to start to think about these systems as you start to define what an omnichannel content platform is, and this will evolve. But as we sit here today, I think we need to start to think about a system that handles a variety of different content types as first-class objects. So what I'm speaking about here is like text and copy snippets alongside of traditional assets and videos and audios. Maybe you're managing offers or micro experiences or pieces of documents or full documents. Managing all these things as base content items that can be used in a variety of different channels. So there are a bunch of vendors who are on this path to be able to do this. I don't think they're all there yet, but they're all claiming to be, and so get ready. So an already blurry MarTech world is about to get blurrier, and we're predicting that every web content management vendor and every DAM vendor will start to call themselves an OCP, but it's not just DAM in web content management. It's marketing ops technology, even CRM technology, who I think will start to say, well, we can do this as well. So get ready for that in 2020. Next up, prediction number 7 is specific to web content management. And this is that we think that there'll be a backlash against this notion of a web content management toolkit. So what I mean by that is, in every software marketplace, we find that there's a spectrum between platforms and products. Platforms, on one hand, think of it as a bunch of tools so that you can build a bunch of functionality in ways that really suits your needs, whereas a product tend to be more baked out and have a true fitness to purpose, being built to satisfy certain use cases and those only. And so in any software marketplace, I don't care if you're talking about word processing software to digital asset management to marketing automation technology to web content management, the pendulum tends to swing back and forth, as we look at it from an analyst perspective. Sometimes you see more product-based tools and sometimes you see more platform-based tools. And in recent years, in the web content management world, we've seen the pendulum swing towards the platform side. And so we've seen this notion of providing a toolkit of services to buyers. And our prediction for 2020 is that we'll kind of see a backlash against that. We've almost felt like the pendulum has swung too far towards the toolkit, and buyers will start to say, well, we want something more fully baked out to meet our needs, and buyers will start to demand something that's already pre-built with less heavy lifting needed on their part as buyers. Number 8 is also a web content management related prediction, and this is one that we think every web content management vendor is going to say, we're going to provide a headless option. What do I mean by headless? In the web content management world, headless means that you can provide some core content management services without also providing the presentation and delivery services on the front end. So it's this notion of separating back-end services from front-end delivery services. This has become really in vogue over the last few years, this notion of headless web content management. And in this area, we think that we are going to hit a bit of a tipping point. We think that everyone's going to say, okay, we can provide headless for you. But I think the real notion here is that head optional, if you will, is what's really going to win out. We think that while many buyers want a headless option, and for some scenarios that really is the right approach, but that's not right for everyone. And in fact, I'd say the majority of people still want an option to handle the delivery side as well. And so I think most vendors will tick the box that they can provide a headless option, but in the end, they're really going to offer you as buyers choices, whether you want to go truly headless. And as buyers, that's good news, because I think choice is always good. Speaking of headless, that brings us to prediction number 9 here. And we've noticed at the end of 2019 that many DAM vendors are starting to get on board the headless train, if you will, and say, well, we're going to provide something called headless DAM. And what do I mean in the DAM world is, traditionally DAMs have been ways to manage your video and image assets, but as part of that, it was also a way for you to provide your employees with a view to your assets, to your library. So it became kind of like what we're seeing on the screen here, like a portal viewer to your library of available assets, right? And that's what people consider the DAM. But in the headless world, your employees might not even know they're working within a DAM, right? So in a headless world, your people might be using assets from a DAM, but only working within a web content management system. Or maybe I'm only building emails, but if I'm pulling from a single source of truth in the DAM, that I'm achieving my goals of making sure I'm using the right asset, but I might not have that interface, that user experience of working within a DAM. I might be just pulling into the other systems. And so I think that notion of headless DAM will arise. But again, just like we talked about in prediction number 8 in the web content world, I think what will eventually win out in the DAM world as well is for buyers to have an option of whether they want to take a headless approach or have an interface as well. Our final prediction today is about the CDP marketplace. Customer data platforms is a rapidly evolving and changing market. We're covering a bunch of new vendors in 2019, and we'll probably continue to add more in 2020. But if there's one takeaway that we noticed in the course of our research is there's a lot of commoditization in this marketplace as we sit here today. There's a lot of overlap in functionality, and it's difficult sometimes to differentiate between these vendors. And so we think that these vendors are really going to start to specialize. Okay, and we started to see this a bit, happening a bit already, but we think this specialization is going to accelerate in 2020. Already certain vendors are saying, we're gonna specialize in becoming the really data centric, whereas other vendors are saying we're gonna really specialize in being much more engagement oriented. I think some vendors are going to start to specialize in certain industries and verticals, and others will maybe get left behind as being too general. And so, like I said, this specialization is happening already. It's starting to happen. It's what happens in any early kind of marketplace, and I expect that to continue in 2020. So let's wrap up. Here's our 10 2020 predictions. Dawn of a new stack, number 1. Number 2, Omnichannel is moving from aspirational to internal councils actually being developed. Non-technical issues are certainly rising to the fore. People are starting to rethink the MarTech spending boom. Number 5, continued marketplace expansion will happen in the MarTech universe. Number 6, every DAM and web content management vendor will declare they're an omnichannel content platform. People will start to have this backlash against web content management toolkits at the platform end of the spectrum. We think every web content management system will ultimately offer a headless option, but we think that notion of head optional will win out. Headless DAM will gain traction more than ever in 2020, and CDP specialization is going to accelerate. With that, I want to thank you all for attending all of our webinars here in 2019. We've done a bunch, and we've seen many of you on multiple webinars, if not all of the webinars, and we thank you so much for supporting us over the years. We are planning on hitting the ground running in 2020 with a series of marketplace trends discussions with regard to all of our marketplaces that we cover. So subscribers, stay tuned for that early in 2020. If there's any of you thinking about seeing what's behind the paywall at Real Story Group and seeing what else we have to offer, there's a ton of research that sits behind all of these predictions and all of our webinars. So go try it out. Get an excerpt of a free research chapter. Go try out our real quadrant shortlist generator and our real-time vendor comparison tools. You can do so at realstorygroup.com. And if anyone's interested in the council I mentioned on, talking to some of your peers in a vendor-free confidential environment, feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to talk to you about that as well. Thank you all so much for your support and Happy New Year.